Today, I want to talk about the book Jerusalem, the Biography. Jerusalem is an incredibly famous city, often praised to the heavens. For example, the Jewish Talmud states, "If there are 10 parts of beauty in the world, 9 are in Jerusalem." This sentiment isn't exclusive to Judaism. Christianity and Islam also consider Jerusalem a holy city. Before we get started, please click on the subscribe button below to stay updated and support Daily Book Dive. From a religious perspective, Jerusalem is one of the most sacred cities in the world. As the author of Jerusalem, the Biography, puts it, Jerusalem is the only city that exists both on earth and in heaven, meaning that although this city is on earth, followers of the three major religions regard it as paradise. However, this also causes problems. All three religions believe Jerusalem should be their territory. For over 1,000 years, they have been fighting over this, resulting in countless wars. Why is the Middle East so chaotic? One of the main reasons is the issue of Jerusalem. Even before the birth of Christianity and Islam, Jerusalem's 3,000-year history was rarely peaceful. This book tells the story of such a city and such a grand and fascinating history. The author, Simon Sebag Montefiore, is a British scholar from Cambridge University's History Department and a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. His ancestors built the first Jewish residential area outside the old city of Jerusalem, indicating a unique connection with the city. Jerusalem, the Biography, was published in 2011 and became an instant hit. Bill Clinton selected it as his book of the year, and Henry Kissinger also highly praised it. Since Kissinger is Jewish, his evaluation is quite representative. Prestigious magazines like Newsweek and The Economist also gave it various praises. It won numerous well-known literary awards in countries like the UK, US, France, and Austria, and was translated into 35 languages, making it famous across much of the world. Why is this book so well regarded? Because the history it covers is incredibly long and complex, and some parts are quite sensitive. Explaining it clearly is challenging, and doing so objectively, fairly, in a way that is both easy to understand and engaging is even rarer. What can we gain from this book? First, a systematic set of knowledge. After reading this book, you'll have a general understanding of Jerusalem's 3,000-year history. Secondly, through this knowledge framework, you can better understand today's international, especially Middle Eastern news hotspots and see the world's changes more clearly. Finally, we often say that reading history should broaden our perspective. From the grand scope of Jerusalem's 3,000 years, what insights can we gain? Let's take a look. Part 1. Jerusalem's 3,000-year history is so complex and chaotic that it can be summarized in one sentence. 3 owners fighting over property rights. The 3 owners are Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Of course, throughout history, Jerusalem has had many rulers, but these 3 are the most significant. Jerusalem, the Biography, is structured chronologically, focusing on these 3 groups' appearances. We will also follow this structure to discuss the backgrounds of these 3 owners, their stories with Jerusalem, and their property disputes. First, let's briefly introduce the disputed property, Jerusalem. We know that the earliest civilizations appeared in the Middle East's Mesopotamia, which is today's Iraq, and in the Near East, which is Egypt. Later, European civilization emerged in Greece. Jerusalem is located at the crossroads of these major civilizations, making it a prime location. It is in a mountainous area, suitable for building defensive structures, and has springs, making it a desirable place to live. About 7,000 years ago, people settled there. Around the 20th century BCE, about 4,000 years ago, the name Salem appeared in records, indicating the city's establishment. At that time, it was a weak city-state, relying on stronger powers like Egypt for protection. During this period, various small nations fought over the area, and Jerusalem frequently changed hands, including to the Jews, who became the first owners to enter our story. The Jews arrived in Canaan, which is today's Israel and Palestine, between the 20th and 15th centuries BCE. After being enslaved in Egypt and led back to Canaan by Moses around the 13th century BCE, they expanded their territory. By the 11th century BCE, under the leadership of King David, they defeated the Philistines, unified the region, and established the ancient kingdom of Israel with Jerusalem as its capital. Judaism, the Jewish religion, regards the first part of the Bible, the Old Testament, as its sacred text. The Jews are deeply religious, and their faith has been a source of unity through their turbulent history. After David established the kingdom, Jerusalem became both the political and religious center of Judaism. King Solomon, David's son, built the first temple on Mount Zion, solidifying Jerusalem's status as the Jews' holy city. However, the Jews' power remained limited. After Solomon's death, the kingdom split into two, and they were often invaded. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem and the first temple, exiling many Jews to Babylon. Later, the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great defeated Babylon and allowed the Jews to return and rebuild the Second Temple. Notably, Persia is modern-day Iran, highlighting the historical connections between Jews and Iranians, despite current tensions. Part 2. Subsequently, the Jews' struggles continued as they were conquered by Alexander the Great and his successors. Their religion remained their spiritual anchor, with Jerusalem becoming increasingly significant as their holy city. In 66 BCE, the Romans arrived, turning the region into a province of the Roman Empire and renaming it Palestine after the Philistines. This marked the end of Jewish sovereignty and left the community in a state of uncertainty. The next significant chapter involves the emergence of Christianity. Jesus, born in Bethlehem near Jerusalem around 4 BCE, traditionally marked as 1 CE, challenged the Jewish priesthood and Roman authorities with his teachings. He focused on the afterlife and spiritual salvation, attracting many followers. His teachings culminated in his crucifixion in Jerusalem around 33 CE. Some sources suggest 29 CE, at a place called Golgotha. After Jesus' death, his disciples continued to spread his message, forming Christianity. Two major events followed in Jerusalem: the Jewish revolt against Roman rule in 66 CE, leading to the city's destruction, and Emperor Hadrian's complete rebuilding of Jerusalem in 130 CE, renaming it Aelia Capitolina and expelling the Jews. Despite this, Jews maintained a spiritual connection to the city. Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, enduring persecution until Emperor Constantine legalized it in 313 CE. By 337 CE, Constantine himself was baptized, cementing Christianity's prominence in Europe and establishing Jerusalem as a Christian holy city. From Constantine's era onward, Jerusalem was under Roman, later Byzantine, control, becoming a spiritual home for Christians worldwide. This made Christians the city's second major owners. Part 3. Next, Islam emerged in the 7th century, founded by the Prophet Muhammad. According to Islamic tradition, Muhammad's night journey to heaven began in Jerusalem, making it Islam's third holiest city after Mecca and Medina. The Arab Empire under Caliph Umar captured Jerusalem, and it remained under Muslim control for centuries. Jerusalem's three primary owners, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all value the city highly for religious pilgrimages and other activities, but their coexistence has been fraught with conflict. The Crusades, initiated by Pope Urban II in 1095, aimed to reclaim Jerusalem for Christianity, leading to 2 centuries of warfare. The First Crusade succeeded in capturing Jerusalem in 1099, but subsequent crusades failed, and Muslim forces led by Saladin in 1187 eventually recaptured the city. The Ottoman Empire later controlled Jerusalem, maintaining Muslim dominance while European Christians became preoccupied with the Renaissance, age of exploration, and Industrial Revolution, reducing their focus on the city until the 19th century. In the 19th century, declining Ottoman power led to increased interest in Jerusalem from European powers like Napoleon and Tsarist Russia, while cultural figures like Gogol, Flaubert, Thackeray, Melville, and Twain visited the city. Simultaneously, Jews began planning their return, aiming to reclaim their ancestral home and establish a nation. Part 4. Driven by centuries of persecution in Europe, Jews embraced Zionism in the late 19th century, aspiring to establish a Jewish state. The British supported this movement through the 1917 Balfour Declaration, which endorsed a national home for Jews in Palestine. After World War I, Britain controlled Palestine, and Jewish immigration increased. Tensions with the Arab population grew, leading to clashes and British proposals for a two-state solution, which the Arabs rejected. World War II and the Holocaust intensified international support for a Jewish state. In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan for Palestine, creating separate Jewish and Arab states with Jerusalem as an international city. The Jews accepted, but the Arabs did not, leading to the establishment of Israel in 1948 and subsequent Arab-Israeli conflicts. Despite multiple wars, Jerusalem remains divided and contested. The city is split into Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and Armenian quarters, reflecting its complex history and ongoing disputes. In conclusion, the main content of Jerusalem, the biography, is the history of this city and this period, outlining the general threads of its 3,000-year history. Let's recap. Using the analogy, Jerusalem is an old house with 3,000 to 4,000 years of history. 3 families have lived there. The first owner, the Jews, built the temple here over 3,000 years ago, so they considered Jerusalem very sacred. However, over 2,000 years ago, the Jews were expelled by the Romans and scattered across Europe and the Middle East. Later, about 16 or 1700 years ago, the Romans converted to Christianity and became Christians. Since Jesus preached and was martyred in Jerusalem, they also regarded this place as very sacred and became the second owners. Then, over 1,400 years ago, Islam was born, and because Muhammad ascended to heaven here, Muslims also considered Jerusalem a holy city. They later expelled the Christians and became the third owners of Jerusalem. 900 years ago, the second owners, the Christians, became increasingly dissatisfied and organized crusades against the Muslims, leading to over 200 years of conflict known as the Crusades. They briefly regained control of Jerusalem but were eventually driven back to Europe. Meanwhile, the first owners, the Jews, who had been wandering outside and feeling discontent, wanted to return to their homeland, Jerusalem, and establish their own country. About 100 years ago, they began planning this effort, and with the support of the British and Americans, leveraging the global situation from World War I and World War II, They successfully established the State of Israel in 1948. However, the third owners, the Muslims who had lived in Jerusalem and its surrounding areas for about 700 to 800 years, were unwilling to accept this. They joined forces with other Arab nations to fight Israel, leading to 5 major wars since 1948. Currently, Jerusalem is divided, with each side occupying parts of it and a portion inhabited by the second owners, the Christians. The ownership of this old house remains unresolved, contributing to the ongoing instability and lack of peace in the Middle East. After hearing all this, do you feel you have gained a better understanding of Jerusalem's history and the background of the Middle Eastern situation? This is the primary takeaway from this book. The original book link is attached at the end for further reading. You can also click the Share button below the video to share this book with your friends. Congratulations, you've just finished another book.